She spent 27 years raising their son alone, then walked into court and realized the man being sued for child support was the one who left her pregnant and disappeared. The courtroom was already quiet when Judge Renetta Coles took her seat behind the bench. It always was in Department 204 of the Fresno County Courthouse. Her reputation alone was enough to keep mouths shut and eyes front. 10 years in this seat had taught her how to read a room, who was scared, who was bluffing, and who was just plain tired. But on that Tuesday morning, it wasn't the room that caught her attention. It was a name, Darius Wynne. She read it twice to be sure, her eyes narrowing slightly. A barely there pause. Her heart didn't race. She wouldn't give him that. But her body knew something her face would never show. A name she hadn't spoken in nearly 3 decades had just appeared on her docket like it belonged there. Charged with failure to pay child support for a 5-year-old girl. Petition filed by the child's mother, Tanisha Everett. Routine family court matter. Except it wasn't. Not for her. The bailiff called his name. Her fingers curled slightly under the bench. He walked in like nothing. Wrinkled khakis, a button-down with a stain on the sleeve, and a leather folder tucked under one arm like he was showing up for a job interview he didn't prepare for. Hair thinner, stomach wider, but the same walk, the same smirk. Renetta kept her tone level. "Mr. Wynne, please approach the table." He glanced at her. Just a glance. No spark of recognition. Not even a flicker. That stung more than she expected. She'd told herself this wouldn't feel personal. It couldn't. But seeing him now, standing on the other side of justice, the man who walked out on her and their son without a single word, the weight of it all pressed against her chest. The attorney next to him, a public defender with folders spilling from her briefcase, gave a quick nod and introduced them both. "Your Honor, my client Mr. Wynne contests the arrears claim. He believes the child's mother has misrepresented her financial standing." Renetta gave no reaction. "Is that right, Mr. Wynne?" Darius leaned forward, finally offering a half-smile. "Yes, ma'am. I think there's been some confusion. Tanisha's been trying to squeeze me dry. I'm not a bad guy. I just think it's unfair." That voice. Same smooth, easy tone he used to get out of late-night arguments and missed birthdays. She'd heard it all before. She glanced down at the file. No mention of priors, no criminal charges, just a civil claim. But her mind couldn't let go of what wasn't written there. Darius had vanished from her life when she was 22, just months after their son was born. No warning, no phone call, just gone. She remembered holding Khalil in her arms and thinking, he doesn't even know his father's name. And now, here he was, this man, talking about fairness. She cleared her throat. "And you've made no payments in the past 5 years?" He shrugged. "Look, I've had some tough times. I lost a job during the pandemic. I'm trying to get back on my feet. I've been helping in other ways. Cash, groceries sometimes, just nothing official." The courtroom stayed quiet, but the tension started to grow roots. A few people in the audience looked up from their phones. Renetta leaned back slightly. She wasn't angry. Not yet. But she was curious. Curious to know how much this man had changed. If at all. She said slowly. "And have you had contact with the child?" He scratched his jaw. "Not really. Her mom won't let me, of course. Always someone else's fault." Renetta turned to the mother's attorney and asked a few questions about missed payments and text records. The usual. Her voice steady, her hand still. But something inside her was uncoiling, like an old thread being pulled tight. She looked at Darius again. He didn't recognize her. Not even a hint. It was almost funny. He stood there, making excuses, never once looking her in the eyes like a man facing judgment. She knew this version of him well. Charming when it suited him. Always 1 foot out the door. But this time, the door led right back to her courtroom. But as he walked through the courtroom doors, something inside her shifted. And it wasn't anger. Not yet. Renetta didn't speak right away. She asked the clerk to pause for a brief recess and stepped into chambers, closing the door behind her. For a moment, she just stood there, gripping the edge of her desk. She wasn't shaking, but her skin felt tight, like her body remembered more than her mind had prepared for. Darius Wynne. The name used to mean something. Not just a man, not just a mistake. He was her first everything. First love, first heartbreak, first betrayal that stuck around and grew teeth. They met at Cal State Bakersfield. Spring semester. She was 20, majoring in criminal justice and pushing herself harder than anyone expected from a girl raised by a janitor and a hospital cook. He was a smooth-talking psychology major with a part-time job at a tire shop and a way of making people feel seen. She didn't fall for him quickly. He worked at it, brought her lemon donuts when he knew she skipped breakfast, helped her rewrite a paper after her professor gave her a C just to be difficult. He made her laugh. He made her think she was more than just smart. He made her feel special. And then she got pregnant. It wasn't planned. It wasn't convenient. But she was determined. Her parents were disappointed, sure, but they didn't abandon her. Darius didn't either. At first. He promised they'd make it work. They even went to a prenatal class together at the clinic near Olive Drive. But something changed in him around the 7th month. He started showing up late, sometimes not at all. He said he was busy, said his job was cutting hours, said he was tired. Then one morning, she woke up and his phone was off. His dorm room empty. His things gone. No goodbye, no warning, just a void. Her son, Khalil, was born without a father in the room, and she told herself that was okay, because she would be enough. She had to be. She juggled diapers and textbooks. She breastfed while writing final papers. She graduated late, but she graduated. Then law school. Scholarships. Nights of sleeping on the floor with her son tucked into her side. Every time she doubted herself, she pictured Darius walking away, and she used it like fuel. Now here she was, a superior court judge, a title no one could take from her. And there he was, standing in her courtroom, talking about fairness, still pointing fingers. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at herself in the mirror above the sink. Her reflection was calm, controlled. But behind the stillness, her heart was storming. She remembered once, just once, when Khalil was 5, he asked her why he didn't have a dad like the other boys. She didn't cry. She just held him and said, "Some people aren't strong enough to show up." That was the truth. Even if it didn't answer everything. Back in the courtroom, Renetta took her seat again like nothing had happened. No one would know she'd just relived 27 years in 10 minutes. Darius sat with that same half-smile, like he was still the most important man in the room. He had no idea the judge across from him once cried herself to sleep because of him. No idea that the boy he left behind had become a man. No clue that the woman in the black robe used to wear his sweatshirt to class because it smelled like him. And still, he didn't recognize her. Not even now. She wondered, was it arrogance? Or did he just forget her that easily? Either way, she would not be forgotten again. But as he took the stand and said her name, "Your Honor," without a flicker of recognition, something cracked. The bailiff's voice echoed softly. Case number 22-1497. Tanisha Everett versus Darius Wynne. Petition for child support enforcement. Renetta sat straight, hands folded lightly in front of her. The courtroom settled into a hush again, and this time she noticed the tension curling around the space like invisible thread. A few people from earlier cases lingered in the back. Family members, interns, maybe someone from the press taking notes for a slow news week. Nobody knew what was really going on. Not yet. Tanisha Everett sat to the left, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and a pin-straight posture that spoke of dignity under pressure. Next to her, her attorney, a younger woman named Anna Reeves, was already flipping through documents. Across from them, Darius leaned back like this was a misunderstanding, not a pattern. "Ms. Reeves," Renetta said, "please proceed." Anna stood, firm but respectful. "Your Honor, my client is seeking enforcement of a child support order originally filed 2 years ago. Mr. Wynne has failed to make consistent payments. As of last month, he owes just over $18,400. He has made only 3 partial payments in 25 months. He also has not visited the child or contributed in any non-monetary way since the child was born. Renetta looked at Darius. "Mr. Wynne, how do you respond?" He crossed his arms slowly, like the weight of responsibility itself was some sort of burden being unfairly tossed his way. "I told you earlier, I've helped in my own way. I brought groceries twice. I gave her a Target gift card once, and I never agreed to that amount. 18,000? That's insane." Tanisha's mouth tightened, but she didn't speak. Anna kept her voice steady. "There are text records, Your Honor, showing Mr. Wynne ignoring repeated requests. In one message he actually says, and I quote, 'I didn't sign up for this.'" Renetta turned to Darius. "Did you say that?" He gave a weak shrug. "I might have. But come on, people say stuff when they're frustrated. That doesn't mean I don't care." "And yet you've had no contact with your daughter since her birth?" "She's better off. Her mom's doing fine. I'd just mess things up." That hit Renetta harder than she expected. Her mind went straight to Khalil, to all the birthday parties with an empty chair, to the little graduation ceremonies where she'd clap alone while her son searched the crowd for someone who was never going to show up. She adjusted her glasses. "Better off without you. Is that what you're saying?" He hesitated. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm saying I've made mistakes, okay? But the system's never on our side. Black men like me, we get punished for being broke." Renetta leaned forward slightly. "This isn't about punishment, Mr. Wynne. This is about responsibility. You owe it to your child to show up. Financially, emotionally, physically, anything short of that is a failure of character, not a flaw in the system." His face twitched, just for a second, like he'd heard something in her tone that didn't match the script he was running in his head. But it passed, and he went right back to his rehearsed nonsense. Anna continued with her presentation. Bank statements, screenshots, calendar logs showing missed visitation appointments. Darius stared straight ahead through most of it. He didn't flinch, didn't comment. Just sat like the facts were part of someone else's story. Renetta studied him. She was no longer surprised he didn't recognize her. He never really saw people, not unless they were useful. She remembered how he used to pretend to listen, only to talk about himself 5 minutes later. And now here he was, barely listening to a case that could change his entire life. A small voice in the back of her mind whispered, "Say something. Let him know who you are." But she didn't. Not yet. Instead, she glanced at the documents again. A pattern was forming, one that looked too familiar to be coincidence. He hadn't just walked away from one child. He'd done it again. And again. The past wasn't some isolated mistake. It was his lifestyle. But then came the moment that changed everything. A single question that rewound time. Renetta closed the folder in front of her. Slowly. Not for drama. She wasn't that kind of judge. But because the weight of what came next deserved silence. The courtroom seemed to lean forward without moving, like everyone could sense the shift. She rested her hands on the bench and looked directly at Darius. "Mr. Wynne," she began, her voice calm but firmer than before. "Before we continue with further evidence, I'd like to ask you something." He blinked. "Sure. Where were you on the night of November 14th, 1998? It was out of place. The attorneys looked up. Even the court reporter paused. Darius frowned. "What?" "November 14th, 1998, she repeated. "Do you remember where you were?" He laughed, a little unsure. "Come on, that was like, 25 years ago? I don't remember what I did last month." "You were 21 at the time," she added, still staring. "It was a Saturday. You had an econ exam on Monday morning. You'd just started working part-time at a tire shop off Stockdale Highway in Bakersfield." He stared at her like she'd just spoken another language. Then his eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" The air in the room thickened. The attorneys went still. Even the bailiff subtly straightened. Renetta didn't answer his question. Not directly. "You drove a green Honda Civic. Manual transmission. The passenger window didn't roll down unless you hit it with your palm first." Darius shifted. "Okay, whoa! What is this?" Renetta folded her hands again. Do you remember a girl who used to sit in the front row of Dr. Casella's criminal justice class? Wore a black scarf over her braids most days. She used to leave early to catch the last bus back to the east side. Something flickered in his eyes. She saw it. Confusion first, then discomfort. He didn't speak. Not yet. She was pregnant that fall, Renetta continued, her voice smooth as polished glass. Her boyfriend vanished before the baby came. She had to beg her landlord not to evict her when the rent fell behind. Darius swallowed. Renetta let the silence stretch just enough. That girl, she said, was me. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. A sound of whispered disbelief. Heads turning like a breeze had passed through them all. Darius leaned forward, his voice low. Wait, you're Renetta Coles, she said. And you were the man who left. He shook his head, not out of denial, but confusion. He stared at her longer now, deeper, the memories in his face rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces too long scattered. Rennie? He said under his breath. She almost laughed. Rennie. He was probably the last person who called her that. It sounded so out of place in this courtroom, it might as well have come from another planet. You remember now, she said. He nodded slowly, eyes wide, voice soft. I didn't know. I didn't recognize you. You didn't recognize your own past, she replied. You've been running from it for so long, I imagine all the faces blurred together. His mouth opened to speak, but nothing came out. Tanisha's attorney cleared her throat, trying to figure out whether this was still a child support hearing or a confession. Renetta addressed the room without missing a beat. Let the record reflect that I disclosed a prior relationship with the defendant. I will recuse myself from making a final ruling on this case, and the hearing will be reassigned to a new judge within the hour. Gasps again, but not for the recusal. For everything else. Darius shook his head. You're serious? I was serious the day you left me alone in a maternity ward. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud, but it landed like a stone dropped in still water. He looked around the room like someone might save him, but this wasn't a movie. No script, no escape. But it wasn't until he looked directly into her eyes that the color drained from his face. Darius slumped back into his chair like someone had cut the strings holding him upright. His eyes didn't leave her now, not for a second. Not like before. Not like when he strutted in thinking this was just another routine mess to wiggle out of. He saw her now, fully, and he didn't know what to do with that. He tried to speak, but the words came out clumsy. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know it was you, Rennie. It's Judge Coles, she said flatly. He blinked. Right, of course. For a moment, he seemed smaller than he had before, not just physically. Something in his posture had folded. That signature confidence he wore like a cheap coat was gone. I wasn't trying to be that guy, he said, hands slightly raised. I was young. I was scared. I didn't know how to be a dad. You didn't even try, she said. You didn't call. You didn't send a note. You disappeared. I thought you were better off without me. You decided that for me. He opened his mouth to argue, but she raised her hand, not to silence him like a judge, but like a woman done listening to excuses. The courtroom remained still. Even Tanisha sat quiet, looking between them like she was watching two strangers fight about a fire no one else could see. Darius rubbed his face. Look, I can't change what I did back then. I'm sorry. All right? I was a mess. I messed up. I was in my own head. I was scared I'd ruin everything. Renetta tilted her head slightly. And yet here you are, 27 years later, doing the exact same thing. That stung. She saw it. A wince barely there. I'm not that guy anymore, he muttered. No? She asked. Then why is Tanisha sitting here with an $18,000 debt hanging over her while you stand there blaming everyone but yourself? His lips parted. But nothing came out. She continued. You didn't change, Darius. You just got older. The room stayed quiet. No one dared move. And then, just behind the back row of benches, a door opened gently. A young man in a navy sweater stepped inside. Tall, built like a sprinter, neat beard, calm eyes. He didn't look confused or rushed. He walked in like he belonged. Renetta saw him and nodded, just once. Darius turned, following her gaze, and when he saw the young man, he squinted. Something about him looked familiar, something in the way he held himself, the stare, the way he didn't flinch. "Who's that?" Darius asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Renetta answered without hesitation. "Your son." If the courtroom gasped before, now it just exhaled into stunned silence. Tanisha's mouth dropped slightly. Anna looked toward her client. The clerk stopped typing. Even the bailiff looked down like he was processing too much at once. Darius stood up slowly. No, that can't be him." "It is," Renetta said. "His name is Khalil Coles. He's 27, graduated from San Jose State, works as a youth advocate here in Fresno." Khalil stepped forward, his voice clear. "I came to watch the hearing. I didn't know it would be you either, but I figured it out when Mom started asking about a tire shop and a green Honda." He looked at Darius for a long moment. "You're shorter than I pictured," he added. Darius laughed once, almost out of reflex. "Man, I didn't know. Nobody told me." "I was never hiding," Khalil said. "You just didn't look." That landed. Hard. Darius looked like he wanted to speak again, but he couldn't seem to find the right words. "You got a second chance," Khalil continued. "And you still ran." The courtroom was dead silent. Renetta didn't say a word. She let the moment hang. But the real twist wasn't in the past. It was sitting quietly at the back of the room. Khalil didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every word he spoke settled in the room like weight added to a scale. Slowly, steadily, shifting the balance. "I used to wonder what you looked like," he said, eyes fixed on Darius. "Mom never showed me pictures. She didn't have any. Said you were gone before cameras on phones were even a thing. I figured you probably looked like me. Turns out you don't." Darius tried to smile. "Look, man, Don't call me man." Khalil's voice was even. "We're not friends. You don't get to call me anything." Darius lowered his gaze. "I heard about this case through a friend at the courthouse," Khalil continued. "Didn't think twice about it until Mom asked me last night if I remembered the name Wynne. And something about the way she said it. I just knew." Darius looked at him, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry." Khalil gave a dry laugh. "You know what I always wondered growing up? If I walked past you on the street, would you even know who I was? Turns out I already got my answer." "I didn't know, Khalil," Darius said. "I was young and I panicked. I didn't have anything to give. You had you to give. But you gave that to nobody." He paused, then added, "Or worse. Just whoever came next. That one hit." Darius looked like he wanted to fold into himself. But Khalil kept going, calm as ever. "You think a gift card and 2 bags of groceries make you a father. You abandoned 2 kids now, and probably more we don't know about. You're not unlucky. You're irresponsible." Darius let out a long breath. "I know I failed you. I know it." Khalil stepped closer, just a few feet away. "You didn't just fail me. You failed her too." He pointed toward his mother. "She did everything without you. No help, no breaks. She graduated with a baby on her hip. She made it to law school. She sat up all night helping me with homework after court hearings. You left her with nothing, and she made everything." Renetta didn't say a word. Her face didn't change. But her eyes, they shimmered just enough for Khalil to notice. And when he did, he softened. "I'm not angry," he said, turning back to Darius. "Not anymore. Because I made peace with this years ago. You weren't there. I stopped expecting you to be. But I want you to hear me when I say this. I don't owe you forgiveness." Darius swallowed hard. "You don't. You're right. You don't. Good," Khalil said. "Because I'm not giving it." Then he turned to his mom. "I'm good," he told her. "You don't have to carry this anymore." That was the moment Renetta let her shoulders relax just a little, like a rope had been untied inside her chest. Khalil nodded once to the bailiff, then turned and walked out. Not in a rush, not making a scene. Just done. Darius didn't follow him. Couldn't. He sat back down slowly, like he'd just been hit by something invisible. His eyes stayed on the floor. Tanisha looked at him, really looked at him, and then shook her head. Whether it was pity or disgust, no one could quite tell. Renetta cleared her throat. This case will still be reassigned to another judge, but the facts remain. You've been given chance after chance to show up, and every time you chose to disappear. Darius nodded faintly. I know. No, Mr. Wynne, she said. You don't know. But maybe now you're starting to feel it. But just when you think it's over, Renetta makes a decision no one expects. The courtroom had grown thick with silence. Heavy, charged, not even the sound of shuffling papers or shifting seats to break it. Darius stayed still, his hands clasped like he didn't trust himself to move. Across the aisle, Tanisha sat upright, her expression somewhere between tired and vindicated. Renetta glanced at the clerk. Have the reassignment documents been sent? They're on the way, Your Honor, she nodded. This should have been the end. She'd done her duty, disclosed the conflict, recused herself, kept everything above board. But something in her felt unfinished. She looked at Darius again. Not as an ex, not even as a judge, just as a person staring across a chasm someone else dug. You ever stop to wonder what you left behind? She asked quietly. Darius lifted his eyes, unsure whether he was supposed to answer. I'm not talking about money, or visits. I'm talking about Khalil. What kind of man he could have become with a father who tried, with a father who stuck around. I thought about it, Darius muttered. When? She asked. Between which excuses? He flinched, and for once he didn't try to dodge the blow. I don't need to see a verdict to say this, Renetta continued, because this isn't about court anymore. This is about accountability. You didn't just walk away from a woman and a child. You walked away from the work, from the effort, from the responsibility of looking someone in the eye and saying, I'll be here even when I don't know how. That's what being a parent is. Darius looked up at her. You were always stronger than me. No, she said. I just didn't have the luxury of being weak. The room held its breath. I watched Khalil take his first steps alone in a studio apartment over a laundromat, she said. I heard him cry for someone I couldn't give him. I answered questions I wasn't ready to answer. And I didn't complain, because complaining wouldn't put food on the table or gas in the car. You get me? Darius nodded slowly. Yeah, I get you. Do you really? Her voice sharpened just slightly. Because men like you always say that when the truth starts burning. You say you understand. You say you're sorry. But understanding doesn't fix 27 years. Apologies don't fill gaps. He lowered his head again. No tears, just quiet shame. And Tanisha? Renetta turned toward her. She deserves more than promises. She deserves what you've owed her since day one. So let me make this crystal clear. Whatever judge takes over this case, you will comply with the full support order. No delays, no games. I will, he said. I swear. She paused. You don't swear to me. You swear to your child. Then, for the first time, she took a breath deep enough to loosen something inside her. This job has taught me to put emotion aside, to stay objective. But I'm not going to pretend that this didn't shake me. I've carried the memory of you longer than I should have. I don't need closure, Mr. Wynne. I just need the truth. And the truth is, what you did or didn't do didn't break me. Darius opened his mouth, but she held up her hand one final time. Save it. The court clerk entered with a file. Judge Kincaid will take over the case at 3:00 p.m. Renetta nodded. Thank you. Court is recessed. She stood up and stepped away from the bench, her robe sweeping behind her. As she walked out of the courtroom, she didn't look back. Not once. But her final sentence wasn't for Darius. It was for every father who ever walked away. Later that evening, the house was still. Renetta sat on the back patio with a cup of lukewarm tea, her heels kicked off by the sliding door, and the robe she wore at work now folded neatly on the armrest beside her. The sun had already dipped behind the edge of the neighborhood, leaving behind a pale stretch of sky streaked with orange and grey. Khalil came outside without a word and sat next to her, passing her a fresh mug. Hot this time, just how she liked it. You always this quiet after court? He asked. Not always, she said. Only when the past shows up in the docket. He nodded, staring out at the backyard. He looked different than I imagined. They always do, she replied. For a while they just sat there. No courtroom tension, no audience, just mother and son, the way it had been since the beginning. I'm proud of you, Ma. She looked at him. Why? For not losing it, for holding your ground. He took a sip. I don't know if I could have done that. I did what I had to, she said. It wasn't about me anymore. Hasn't been for a long time. Khalil smiled gently. Still, you had the power to drag him through the mud if you wanted, but you didn't. She turned toward him fully now. I didn't need to. You really let it go? Renetta considered that. The easy answer would have been yes, but honesty meant more. I don't know if I let it go, she said, but I stopped letting it own me. There's a difference. He nodded slowly, taking that in. I used to think I needed him. I used to imagine what it would be like if he came back. Like maybe he'd make up for all of it somehow. One day. But today, watching him squirm in front of you like that? He chuckled. That was better. She smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was real. I'm not saying I hated him, Khalil added. But I see now I never missed him. I missed the idea of him. Big difference. Renetta reached over and touched his hand. You became everything he wasn't, Khalil, and you did it without him. That's not something every man can say. They sat like that for a few more minutes, saying nothing. The breeze picked up. A sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the street. Do you think he'll really pay? Khalil finally asked. I don't know, she said. But that's not our burden anymore, and she meant it. She had spent years carrying the weight of someone else's cowardice, wondering if she had done something wrong, questioning why a man could disappear so easily and sleep at night. But sitting there with Khalil, who grew up strong, steady, smart, she realized that the life they built together had nothing to do with Darius. It was built in early mornings before class, in packed lunches scribbled with notes, in scraped knees and broken curfews and graduation speeches and college apartment moves. It was built with love and presence and showing up every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The past had walked into her courtroom, but it hadn't won. She looked over at Khalil again. You gonna be all right? He nodded. More than all right. Renetta leaned back in her chair, the lines in her face easing just a bit. I think I will be too. Because the truth is, sometimes the justice you need isn't in a courtroom. It's in the life you build after the damage. Subscribe if you believe in stories where truth doesn't just hurt, it heals.